I still like the old way, thumbs up. Good evening. This is the April 5th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Paxton Finance Committee. It is officially 7 p.m., the start of our meeting, and with that, I open the meeting and welcome everybody and go right to our agenda, which is shown on the screen for you, which I believe has been sent to everyone as well, which is the review of the minutes of the meeting held a week ago on March 29th, which have been circulated to everybody. Happy to have you look at them again or further and entertain a motion to discuss, whatever your wish.
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from March 29th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And one abstention. No opposed, one abstention. So it passes. Thank you. At some particular point, as we go through the meeting this evening, if you could, even keep your minutes handy, because there may be an occasion to refer back to them in terms of something that was discussed and presented that evening, and seeing the minutes might be useful. So with your indulgence, I'm going to take the meeting agenda slightly out of order and go to item number 5, which is the reserve fund transfer requests, of which there were, in the final analysis, 2 of them sent to your attention for our consideration and deliberation this evening. The first one has to do with a transfer from the reserve fund to central purchasing for the purpose of subsidizing the diesel fuel account, which is in need of some subsidization to the tune of,
Is this the one or is it the other one?
it's this one,
Okay.
to the tune of $3,100, as you can see handwritten above. There was an earlier one that was sent to your attention, that was sent to my attention earlier, that had a smaller request, and since that time, there have been additional needs and additional requests to fund it, now to the tune of $3,100. It currently has a balance in that account of $3,189.55. So adding the $3,100 balance would essentially allow for that bill to be paid, which is maybe one of the flaws of this particular process, because the cost has already been incurred and the bill is due, and money needs to be flowed to the proper account in order for that to take place. So with that, I'd entertain any questions that anybody might have, or comments that they might have.
I have one quick question. Maybe, Heather, maybe you can answer this. So we contract diesel out for an annual contract at a price per gallon?
Yeah.
Probably do it like we do it at work. You get a winter blend price and a summer blend price.
Correct.
So how did the price increase if we had a
It's-
contract?
I think what Donna put this together, I think when she said increase in diesel prices, she just meant from when we budgeted. So last year.
Not increase per gallon price, we
No.
used more than we thought we were gonna use?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and what happens, Mark, to your point of, incurring the cost before we have enough money in it? So what happens is when we're low on diesel, like in the middle of a snowstorm, they come, they fill it up, then they send us the bill. they're not always on top of the bills. We don't always know when we're gonna get them. They've been late the past couple months, but as soon as we get the bill, we pay it. But sometimes there could be a little difference between when they fill it, when we get the bill, and we also may not know how much they're filling, right, until they actually come. Some months, it's, not bad, $500, $600. When we get whopped with those big snowstorms, and that's what this bill was, is a whopper. And this should get us through until at least May 1st. It's not going to resolve the issue for the end of the fiscal year. Again, just my little plug here, if we had bottom line budgeting this year, we'd be able to just pull from one of the other central purchasing lines to cover this, but we don't. So we have to rely on the reserve fund until we get to May 1st, and then we can move things where they need to be.
So the 3,100 is in addition for a bill plus the 31,895.
That's what it looks like. Donna put this together. That appears to be what she's communicating.
So that'll hold us till May, June.
Fingers crossed that no
Nope,
major.
I completely understand. I guess what I'm saying is, so you're gonna have to probably put another amount in between to cover May, June.
Mm-hmm.
What was the central purchasing diesel for 2022, 2023? It just seems like we're off by
42,000.
42,000 and we're gonna be off by maybe 6,000 or 7,000.
So remember, there's two variables that go into it, right? One variable is the cost of diesel, and
I thought that's contract.
it is, but like right now, when I have to budget for next year,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the cost of diesel is in our contract. We haven't done it yet. You don't go out to bid for,
It's $4.64 a gallon per the website. You've already negotiated 2023, 24, right?
no, 22, 23 we've negotiated. We just did 1 year. So we haven't negotiated 24 yet. So that
Okay.
being said, when we're putting the budget together for next year, we don't know what the contract is yet, right? And like right now, we wouldn't want to necessarily negotiate. We want to wait and hopefully the numbers are going to come down before we do so, because otherwise we're going to get whopped with a higher amount. We don't want to do that.
So just, again, it's just a question because I don't understand. Is the central purchasing diesel a July to June budget? So it is really for that, maybe I'm
Fiscal year.
so we have not yet negotiated the 23, 24 diesel price?
So take the 23, 24 out of it, just do one fiscal year. We do one fiscal year at a time. So
Okay.
we're in the 23, FY 23 contract.
Okay,
Fiscal year, not calendar
Yep.
over, right? So the fiscal 24 contract, we haven't negotiated yet.
okay. And this is still on the fiscal 23 contract?
Correct.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
It does. It's just, to me, again,
It seems wonky, I know.
no, yeah, it seems like we're off by, 15% or so.
So FY 23, we had budgeted 42,000. But let me pull up before that for you. It might take me a moment if you had any other questions while I'm looking that up.
So I hate to talk at you while you're
No, don't worry
researching
about it.
and looking something up.
Take me 30 seconds.
So the conundrum that I find myself personally in is that we're obviously going to vote to approve it because the cost has already been incurred, and the DPW people worked their tails off for those particular snowstorm in order to incur this particular cost. Did a wonderful job. The least we can do is let them pay the bill for the diesel fuel that went in the trucks that beautifully plowed our streets. I get that. The point that I have are two. One is, this is not in the reserve fund criteria is for an unforeseen expense. This is not unforeseen, and I wish that there were a couple of other members on the Finance Committee here this evening who could corroborate this, but last year, when $42,000 was budgeted, it was the same number that had been budgeted the year before, and the question was raised, are you sure you have enough money for the year that we're in right now at 42, if that was the 42,000 you had the year before, with fuel prices going up? And everyone said, not to worry, we'll live within our means, we'll do with what we have. Here we are, with 3 months left in the fiscal year, and we're coming back and asking the reserve fund, whose criteria is unforeseen, to subsidizing this amount, which I would submit to you again, was not unforeseen. I think Jeremy might be alluding to the fact it's really a matter of poor budgeting and under budgeting. The second point I have is if we budgeted 42, and we're going to now add 31 to get us over that, that's 45. We got 2 months left to June 30th. In the current budget we've only budgeted 42, 44, so we've already under budgeted in our $329,000 deficit, an amount that's not even taking care of the current year. Unless somebody thinks the diesel fuel prices are gonna come down, it just seems that the reserve fund shouldn't be a safety net for bad budgeting, and that's the feeling that I've gotten the last year and a half. Under budget, don't worry about it, come to the reserve fund. That's not what a reserve fund is supposed to be used for. It's supposed to be used for extraordinary, emergent types of things, which is not the definition. It says extraordinary and unforeseen. Forgive me for saying, but diesel fuel is not extraordinary, and the fact that you should have budgeted higher was not unforeseen, and here we are. So now the other question is, when the year end comes closer and we're into June and you can move the lines back and forth, does that mean this money is coming back to the reserve fund? Or is it approved this evening and gone forever?
So you've asked 3 questions, Mark. Can I start at the beginning?
It is
If that's
indeed.
okay. So first one, Jeremy, your question. So diesel fuel, FY '20 actual was 37 and some change. FY '21 actual was 27. FY '22 was 43,000. So it's varied a little bit.
Right,
over
obviously, the
those
price
times.
increase in the 2022
Yes.
was dramatic.
The other thing, keep in mind, is it all depends on the amount of usage, how much we use, right? So we use our diesel for our DPW vehicles as well as our fire engines, right? Those are DPW vehicles. A lot of the other parts of the fleet are gas, right? When you have a larger snowstorm or more snow events than you expect, I would argue it's unforeseen and you can only predict so many and so much usage on things. And we look at past, right? Like when we're calculating heating oil, postage, telephone, electricity, telephone's a bad example, but heating oil and electricity, I have Donna pull the last couple years with the volume of usages and then the amount of money, and we try to average and kind of predict what it is. We could put enough money in all of these lines to make sure we never run out, but then we're taking money away from other things in the budget. It's a very tight budget year, so I don't know if we can necessarily do that. Like if you said, what number do you feel comfortable? I'd say, give me 60,000 in diesel and we'll probably be okay, but in reality, we probably don't have that.
But again, you could pull, we know how many times those fire trucks go out. We can average the amount of times that the plows have gone out. We had a big storm for 2 days, but other than that, there were some icing events. It wasn't a heavy snowplow winter. If you looked at what your usage was, if this is just per, gallons total instead of price per gallon, you would think that we would have some kind of history over the last 5 years and an average. If the price has gone up, that's understandable, but I certainly don't think that we can't budget for diesel usage with looking at the past 5 to 10 years. The data's gotta be there. We know what we bought.
So what I can say is, I wasn't here last year.
And I appreciate
number,
that.
And I think everyone really just did the best they could on coming up with a number that is as realistic and yet as conservative as they can. Again, bottom line budgeting, what it does allow is if one number has, like if there's more money in heating oil and there's running out money in diesel, you balance the 2 pieces out to get to an even at the end of the day, and then you're not coming to the reserve fund at all. But sometimes we just don't know. I can find those numbers for you, Jeremy. I don't know if we have them for the specific vessels, but I'm sure we definitely have at least the amount of gallons we're filling, and I can get those numbers for you
And
next
again,
time.
I don't wanna see the numbers to make me feel better. I want
No,
it to.
absolutely.
I
You just
obviously
wanna
want the
understand the
budget is
trend.
to be as accurate and to be as well planned for as possible, and diesel is a pretty big component of that.
Yeah. Sorry, you have another question, Mark? I was just
No.
typing so I don't forget.
Well, I thought you said I had 3 and you only answered Jeremy.
Oh, let me see. So Jeremy had those questions.
No,
You
no,
asked
I'll
about
pass.
unforeseen.
I made my point.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve this transfer of $3,100?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Passes unanimous. Lee. So there's a second transfer. This has to do with
IT.
the municipal IT account. Currently, there is a balance in the account to which money is being requested to be transferred from the reserve fund of 615154. Not going to belabor an issue.
That's good. I can-
dollars and 23 cents, but it's really not $14.23. It's, we're going to spend $62 or $300 for a retainer for IT.
So it's a couple pieces. So purchase services right now contains all of the software costs we currently have for IT, right? So our monthly 365 subscription, Sophos, endpoint security, all of those pieces. We currently pay all of those pieces to a third party who then pays those bills, right? That third party is Rabadoo Consulting. And a couple months ago, probably about a month and a half at this point, I think I mentioned this at a prior meeting, our IT director decided that, you know, he was moving on to other things and we needed to find a gap stop measure, right, to get us to the end of the fiscal year. And what we did is we worked with the current consulting firm who we're already working with, and they've already been supporting us as additional support for the past couple of years. And we're paying them at the rate of, it's high, but it's always been that way, $100 an hour. It's a lot. And we maxed out our agreement at 24 hours per month. We have some leftover hours, so we're gonna use them on another project. But that number is a combination of the $2,400 for that, along with the monthly cost that we regularly have to pay for the Office 365 licenses and so forth per month. That $1,423 gets us to what the current bill is for this month. That should get us, hopefully, fingers crossed, to May. Remember, we do have the money that's unused from the IT director's position that's left over that will then transfer into the purchase services on May 1st. So this should be just a small amount, and it was unforeseen that the IT director was gonna leave. So I didn't predict that. Well, I did predict it, I didn't predict it when it happened. How's that?
I didn't invoke unforeseen and extraordinary in this particular
Okay.
case. But it does raise the question, in May, when the money is available in the salary account, which otherwise would have paid for this, does that money come back to the reserve fund?
Well, I guess that's up to the FinCom, right? So you have the reserve fund money, you can, we can do a reserve fund, we can do a line item transfer May 1st from whatever line it was left over back to the reserve fund, or we can transfer it from that line to another line that needs it, either way.
Right, which I wouldn't do just for the sake of doing it, but I'm thinking to myself, well, what if in May, we have $18,000 left in our reserve fund because we've done these things that, this is about the third or fourth one we did it for the animal control officer as well, and then all of a sudden, we can't take care of an extraordinary emergent issue because of these other things that we funded. So I think if the occasion arose, we might ask for it to be refunded, reimbursed to the reserve fund, but other than that, if we don't need it, we probably wouldn't. But I just wanted to know, to reaffirm that the option to make that request is available.
I think it should be. I mean, the other thing, keep in mind, come May 1st, anything that happens, if, I'm just looking at the town clerk has something, break that's $20,000 for elections, it's May 1st. You do a line item transfer out of Tony's budget.
We need some IT
That one
service.
rattled me. Yeah, now I'm gonna need another.
So for those of reviewing it, this is not a retainer for IT support. It's actually uppercase IT support. So is there a motion to support the request?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Passes unanimously. So while we're on the topic of reserves, reserve fund, In a package that I gave everyone this evening, keeping in mind that the Finance Committee has no budget, so this was donated by America's favorite CPA firm. I want you to take a look, if you don't mind, because I gave you one a week ago, and I got a sense that there was a little confusion. Even though they were numbered, it was hard to find your way through it. So what I've done this particular week is I've added a number of things, not asking you to take the one a week ago and this one and shuffle them together and get a new one. I would just archive the one you got a week ago and use this one going forward. But it actually has a table of contents on the inside, so you know everything that's in there. So what I'd like to do is direct your attention to number 4 on your summary, and therefore number 4 in your package, which is a history of the reserve fund. And Heather, if you can find your way there, that the request that I'd like to make is we have a pretty good history of all the things that have come in and out of the reserve fund since 2016. But it ends in 2021. It's my understanding that this was generated from one of the offices at Town Hall. And my request is, could somebody update this to include 22 and 23?
Sure.
I understand 23 is on the face of our workbook budget page, but I think it's pretty compelling in terms of all the activity that has occurred, and not looking to shill for a budget agenda. But in some cases, one case in particular, one year we budgeted $40,000 and we had $39,538 left. So does that come into play at all? That's a question with the budget over the next week or so. So if you could, we could just make a request to have that updated. So that concludes the item on our agenda regarding reserve funds, and now I'd like to go to the next item, item number 6, which is the Economic Development Committee. I have a couple of opening questions and remarks regarding that particular item, but I'm happy to defer to anybody else if they have anything to say before I begin.
Yes. Jeremy, could you make the screen a little bigger? Thank you.
So the deal is that the Economic Development Committee has kind of it's a little frustrating, I think, to members, and I think when I get done speaking, there'll be at least one that will chime in and add to this. It's been pretty frustrating in terms of not getting this off the ground, and if Steve Robesco was here, he'd probably grab the microphone at this particular point. To my knowledge, it's had 3 meetings. I've actually, as a public attendee, I've attended 2 of them. And out of the 3, 2 of the meetings, they didn't have a quorum. And now we can't even get a meeting scheduled in order to not to have a quorum to have any votes. It just seems like this committee is spinning its wheels, and I think the Finance Committee takes it very, very seriously, and forgive me for saying, it could very well be taking it more serious than the Economic Development Committee membership itself. And I don't need to remind everybody, but that the idea of this particular Economic Development Committee originated at the Finance Committee. Seth made the recommendation back in March 29th of 2022. And here we are a year later, and the thing has really not even launched. So I think it speaks to the idea of we want to be some kind of impetus to make it happen and get it off the ground. And the Finance Committee, which we approved our bylaws amendments a week ago, they go before the select board next Monday. I don't think that anything speaks to the point of those amendments more than getting a finance committee member on that committee in an official, not an ex officio capacity. Let them take some control, let them take some leadership, and let's get this thing launched, because I think it impacts every year or every month that it doesn't take place. I think it affects the new growth number that we oftentimes wrestle with. And if you'll forgive me by being the professor here again, but if you go to your particular folder that I passed out to you, and if you go to item number 17, there's a very profound and compelling letter that was sent to me by a particular resident in town that basically, in an earlier meeting when I committed blasphemy by saying that Paxton has a very bad business unfriendly reputation, here's a letter that not only supported that remark, but basically was the motivation for that remark, where this person, who I would haven't asked permission to send it to everybody, so I've given that person some anonymity here, but it says right here, you gotta get the Economic Development Committee off the ground. New growth is trending in the wrong direction. We have a terrible reputation with realtors and builders, and the fix of that is gonna take place, not overnight, but at least it's gonna originate at the Economic Development Committee, and we can't get a meeting. I looked at the website today, there's not one scheduled. I don't know what the problem is, but for whatever it may be worth, we'd like to be involved, get involved, stay involved, be the motivator, and get the thing to start meeting and do something about it. Because right now, it's frustrating to all of us. We've already had one resignation built on frustration of this committee, and I just, Heather, I know it's not entirely on your shoulders, but we're saying we're here to help, but we're also at our end of our rope in terms of frustration. And maybe you're experiencing the very same thing, but this thing has got to get launched and got to get moving. So, anybody else? Okay. So now, going back to our particular agenda is the review, number 4, all things, all people, all matters regarding the budget. And I'm watching the clock. I don't mean that literally in terms of what time it is this evening, but in terms of the calendar, that is. We're running out of time. I would submit that by probably next week, we should have made an overall final determination as to how we're going to balance this particular budget. Question this evening was asked, where are we on our workbook? What's the latest one? I would use the oldest one that you have, but the good news is that the budget deficit is not 444,000, as we had said a number of times before. Heather was good enough to find a miscalculation in local revenues last week to the tune of 115,000, so our starting point is $329,500 deficit. And I want to make sure that before we pour over 46 cost centers and budgets to come up with a balanced budget, because I think I can speak for everybody, there isn't $329,000 worth of cuts in that particular budget to get us to .0. So it's got to be a combination of revenue and expenditures, and I'd like to revisit a form that I submitted last week, which is in your particular packet, which is item number 15, and I think Jeremy might be able to put it on the screen right now, is to go through a couple of these just to make absolutely certain. And I don't want to paraphrase, but if I had to Reader's Digest the presentation of this last week, forgive me, Heather, I haven't rehearsed this with you, but I said yes, 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 and you said no, 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 which is fair. But I want to make sure that there isn't a maybe so or a what if in there so that we can't possibly come up with something so that the revenue side of the equation makes the 329 come way down, and then maybe it is worth going in and cutting somebody's office supplies by $100 or printing by $200. Right now, I think that's a wonderful exercise, but that's going to leave us about $315,000 short of where we need to be. So the first one that I'd like to ask, Heather, of you is if you look at number 3 on your screen, but number 9 in your folder, there happens to be something regarding the excess and deficiency account at the Wachusett Regional School District. And you can see with absolutely no basis for reason, I put $32,000 up here, but I guess assuming that the glass is half full, Heather, can you reach out to Michelle and find out what would be the best case if that excess and deficiency were to come through at the full amount? Is it 32,000, is it 18,000, or is it 65,000? That's a fair question, and we need to be careful because that's best case if it goes through the calendar and they submit all the things that have been unsubmittable up until this particular point. But I'd rather know what the best case number is, and I'm not even close to sure whether or not it happens to be 32. So that's a point. So the next one I'd like us to go to, and the good news is local revenues, number 5. Thank you again for finding that miscalculation. It was a huge benefit to the tune of $115,000. I had 18, you trumped it by 115, I'm taking your number, not mine. But the new growth, we have heard all the presentations in terms of why it can't be any further, but in the minutes, I'm not going to go to the page and the section in it, but in the minutes, the request was made, can we get something from the assessor? Can we ask through you to get it? How is the $75,000 derived? In the minutes, you said you would try. I'm asking you, and hopefully the committee will agree, to actually give that to us, because maybe it can be 82,000. We just need to know, other than the assessor says, I'd like to have the assessor show how that 75 gets calculated. And it could win us over in terms of where her hands are tied and what the rate is per $1,000, and it comes out to be, 72.9, and she rounded up to 75. Right now, I think the uncertainty is discomforting to some people. That is there anything more there? And if there is, then we've done our job to exhaust the possibility. So the question is, again, before we cut somebody's budget for printing for $100, is there anything left there? So just asking to make the request. The next one is the ambulance fund, and I see it as number 7 up here. I actually ask you to go to 2 places, if you don't mind, in your package, and hopefully my Dewey Decimal System's working pretty good here, is to go to item number 3, which is special revenues, and to go to item 5, which is the ambulance fund. And I would submit to you on the particular special revenue fund, you can see in the middle of it, it actually list ambulance receipts received for appropriation. This is now as of February 28th. A short time ago, you saw one as of January 31st. That budget amount has, or that surplus amount has increased substantially. It's now up at $467,000, and I'm just asking the question, do we need to have $500,000 in that particular balance at the beginning of the year, and $500,000 in that balance of that fund at the end of the year? Or could more of it come to the particular general fund in terms of balancing it? It's been a $300,000 for ages. It is increased to $350 this year, which is the biggest jump we've ever seen. But the question is, can it go to $400,000? And when I look at the special revenue fund, I think there's room for it. I know that there's no appetite for it, but I think that there's room for it. And the argument is, well, we need to keep a certain balance in case we need to buy a new ambulance. Well, heaven forbid that we don't have to buy one for $500,000, that we can buy it for much less. And I also direct your attention to number 5, which struck a chord last week, but I've included there literally a page from the audited financial statement. And you can see that the header of this particular page is receivables. The first line speaks to June 30th, 2022, the most recent audited financial statement. You'll see in that particular schedule of receivables under Department and Other, that's the ambulance fund. And we have $638,000 of receivables that's not cash. Therefore, it's not in the special revenue fund, and we reserved of the potential uncollectability of that by over 50%. Now, there's a lot of people around this room that are in the private sector, and allowance for doubtful accounts in the private sector is usually 1.5% to 2%. 5 would be unusual. 10, you're in trouble. We're at 50. In a year ago, it was at 47. So either the town accountant or the town auditor or both are getting concerned that the longer that they remain as receivables, the less likely they are being collected. I think that's a problem. I don't know how to address it, but I'd love all of that receivable, free care and all that aside, which is never going to happen, to be dumped in the special revenue fund, and maybe the 310 the 350 can become 400. I just want to exhaust that particular possibility before we lay people off because we can't balance the budget.
So as far as this amount goes, I did have a conversation with the fire chief this week. They are working right now to try to pull together a good understanding of all of the uncollected debt. So I know he touched on this when he did his presentation for the fire EMS side. But what happens is, he bills about $2,500 for an ambulance ride, right? Rough numbers, if I'm misquoting, Mike, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. So approximately $2,500 he bills. If it's a Medicare case or Medicaid case, right, he only gets $500. So right off the bat, $2,000 is a wash. He can't collect it, it's not collectible, he can't touch it, he's not getting it. Other times, there's insurance allowances where the insurance will only pay X, and then there's Y left over, right? So a lot of times, or even people who aren't insured, they try to go after it, but after so many years, you're kind of SOL. With medical debt, it doesn't really hurt your credit. So it's hard to collect. The former chief, I think at one point, it was explained to me that he actually hired someone to come in and collect. Well, the amount of money that it cost to have that person come in and collect the money and the amount of money the person collected was a wash. So it didn't really make a difference, right? So we've tried a couple different things over the years. A lot of towns have the same piece. What we're trying to work on right now is getting all of these pieces put together, doing a presentation. We're trying to shoot for after town meetings, so sometime in May when things are probably June at this point, things calm down a little bit, to really understand what all those pieces are. And then we have a policy that allows us to, or the select board, to kind of release that debt. So that's not outstanding, it's not hanging out in the books. And, you know, a lot of times towns and select boards will look at how many years has that been outstanding, and okay, we're not gonna collect that, let's move on. So that makes the numbers look better at the end of the day, right? It's not great, because it's not retrieving the number you wanna retrieve, Mark, but I think a good portion of that money's not retrievable in the first place, but at least it takes it and cleans up the book, so that we're not constantly carrying forward a debt that we're never gonna collect.
Heather, how much of that, how does that align with other town, is that
So it's not
common?
uncommon, it's very common.
But do we know
amongst other
specifically if
communities.
we looked at literally, could we literally look at other towns around us and say Holden's 50%, this is, how could we find that out?
We can ask. The other thing, keep in mind, is we have not, to my knowledge, ever washed our hands of any of the debt. We've always left it on the books. So this isn't
Right.
like a year or 2 years of debt. This is
Right.
years upon years upon years of money that we've not been collecting.
Yeah, Mike
So
did
once
say
we
that.
once we clear the books, it will be a lot easier to understand, you know, what percentage on an annual basis are we not collecting. But I think it's worthwhile. I think it's a good presentation that they're trying to put all the information together. And, you know, when I have information and when they're ready to do a presentation, whatever that may be, probably around June to the select board, I'll let FinCom know in case you guys want to either tune in or come attend in case you have any questions. That's the best I can do on that one though, Mark. I'm sorry, I can't write you a check.
No, as long as the presentation moves to 350 to 400,000, they're welcome to come anytime they like, so.
I don't know if that's gonna happen, but, so the other thing I'd say on the ambulance fund, so when we get to the expense side, I was able to work with all of the different departments, including the, fire department, to get the numbers down. And the fire number down is down substantially enough that their decrease would make up for the difference of your increase in the ambulance fund. That being said, I did speak to the fire chief about it, and he didn't feel comfortable doing both. He didn't feel comfortable about putting more in from the receivable side and doing the large cut on the expense side.
Which one would he rather do?
The expense side's the one we've worked on, because when you've combining the two departments, there's a little more flex between the two numbers. And this he sees as, you know, again, if he needs something, whether it be an ambulance, which by the way is now exceeding $400,000, or whether it be, you know, parts for the ambulance, a new cardiac monitor, or a new Lucas device, or whatever it may be, is something that he'd be able to pull out of the funding for that.
So I think the appropriate footnote to my wrestling with this is that it's a great service. The people on the EM side and the fire side of this do it flawlessly, without hesitation. We're a better town as a result of it. They have my full admiration. But we're a finance committee, and we're trying to find every nickel that we can so it doesn't get passed on to the taxpayers. So we wouldn't want anybody to take it personal or be offended by the question, because their service in that regard is exemplary. That wasn't the point, and hopefully nobody took that as the point, so, for those that are watching. So the tree warden, just don't want time to pass, and we haven't done anything, and, then, you know, there's $10,000 of low-hanging fruit there, maybe. I just want to make sure that we say, no can do, no want to do, there's not $10,000 there, nothing to see here, move on, as opposed to cutting somebody's budget by $100 in office supplies.
So.
These have got bigger zeros and more zeros, that's why they're up there.
So I have a couple conversations going simultaneously on that matter. In the budget expense revised, because we currently do not have someone in the position, or even who's pulled papers for that position, that would be a good time to, at a very minimum, modify the stipend down lower. But you want to make sure you have enough in case you do end up having to pay someone. And then I do have a recommended amount of expenses that's less than the amount requested. So although I didn't resolve your issue entirely, I can tell you we're working towards a resolution, and I'm trying to come up with some suggestions.
So for those that may not have followed this or were not here last week, in your folder, number 7, has a pretty detailed listing of other towns where they've dispensed with the tree warden. They've put it under either the municipal light department or the DPW. I would never want to displace anybody from that position, but the timing seemed right when it's up for reelection this time around, and nobody has taken out papers to be elected to that position. So it just seemed like the opportune time to take advantage of the perfect storm in the nicest way coming together. Maybe there's some savings to be held, so the last one before we kind of turn to the expense side is up on there, the opera. All I'm saying is opera and 18 grand, and in the book, you would see your folder, that is. Item number 10 is the year-to-date expenditures. And item number 11 is a report that was issued a while ago in terms of pending and rejected items. You might want to know where I came up with my $18,000 number, and I actually could have come up with more, but I came up with 18 because there's currently a balance of almost 9. And then one of the items up in the body of this particular report, the electronic signs that we have, seems to most people to be completed, and there looks to be some remaining funds in that. It says almost completed, or I don't know if the almost completed to completed is going to cost $10,000. I submit that the little I know about it, I doubt that it would. So you cobble that together and find a way to subsidize something in the budget to help out, and here's $18,000 of it. The what could be possibly helped to be subsidized in the other budget, the report that's identified for you as number 11. This is a report that I've only given you 2 pages of, which was a report issued over a year ago, February of 2022, where the first page speaks to pending projects, and then the page, a few pages back, speaks to rejected projects. But on the pending projects that were discussed the night that the fire truck vote was taken to spend in earmark $750,000, one half of the opera funds and 100% of the second tranche. The question was asked, are there any pending projects that are going to suffer as a result of that? And the answer, with the minutes reflect of that meeting, is no, there aren't. Well, the truth of the matter is, yes, there were, and yes, they are. Because if you look at this and you look at middle of the page, the weekend dispatch window, that's now sitting in the police budget. So we now have to subsidize that in the police budget, when an opportunity a year ago would have been to fund it through ARPA. Maybe only 1 year, but the fact that it was declined, now we're faced with having to put it in our particular budget. Only because I'm a representative of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee by virtue of being a Finance Committee member, but at the top of the page, there's a chipper. Nothing to see here, move on. That's front and center, first asked by the DPW department to be funded by CIPC warrant, which will decide whether we'll do that or not on Wednesday nights, Thursday night rather. So my point is that there was an opportunity to do some of that then. Maybe there's an opportunity to kind of revisit it and have a make-up call of some sort and throw us a bone and give us $18,000 and help us balance a $329,000 deficit. That's essentially the ask there. And then I'll go to 10 and 11 without directing you anywhere, but you've seen in the special revenue funds, and maybe Heather, you just answered this 10 minutes ago, they have a gift and donation account. In some cases, they're pretty healthy amounts there. Could some of that be taken out of or as you just said, take it out of their budget and maybe they subsidize it here. It could have been some of what you just told us 10 minutes ago. That's a good question for us to ask on the screen. If what it is that you said is addressing that, then that's not only a good question, but a good answer. But we need to have that quantified so that we know what our 329 is. Is it 179 or 150 or 327? That's what we're looking to get our arms around before we delve into these 46 cost centers and start cutting budgets, so. And I'll end with saying, I still think you should sell the command car, which if I ride by that public safety building one more time and that thing is sitting there idle,
Which car are you talking about, Mark?
talking about the second one.
'Cause I thought we use all of them. Are you sure it's just sitting there idle and not being in use?
Well, either way, it was acquired when there were two, one in fire, one in EMS, so we needed two command cars. Now we only have one. I'm not gonna get into the fact that the CIPC voted against buying that particular command car. And if you look at the reserve fund, which I directed your attention to 20 minutes ago, it got bought out of reserve fund money, which is not the proper use of a reserve fund. So, if they want to make an argument that they need it, we'll be happy to hear it. We're trying to balance a budget that looked like an opportunity to resolve an issue, another make-up call to help balance the budget. And 10 West, I would sell it tomorrow if, you said it can't be done in this year, but this year is next year. So we got 3 months of this year, and we got 12 months of next year, that's 15 months. I think it can be sold in that particular period of time.
I think what my comment was pertaining to is it's not gonna help you for balancing the budget on the paper today, right? Because you're not gonna be able to see it until free cash is certified in the fall sometime.
No time like the present. So that's my point. So now let us defer to you. I know you had a department meeting last Thursday, and hopefully you came up with some good news.
All right, so I've worked with most of the departments. I say most because a few of them that were so tiny or I knew had zero wiggle room, I didn't, and many of them that I did work with, some of them we were not able to make any headway. There's 2 sheets of paper. The first is kind of the summary sheet, and the next is the detailed sheet with each of the departmental line item details. All right, and just enough for everyone. Here you go, Liam. All right, and I'm done. I don't have a summary sheet for you, but I have a figure sheet. On the summary sheet, you have colors. So there's either orange or blue.
Heather, can I interrupt you? Is
You
it
may.
possible for you to send that to Jeremy in an email format? and
Oh,
he
to
can
put it up there?
put it up?
Probably. Give it a go. So anyway, so when you're looking at that sheet, there's orange and then there's blue. Blue means that the number went up. Orange means the number went down. And the breakdown sheet is not in blue, it's in gray, and it kind of itemizes the specific lines, and I have a decent recall of what those changes are. So hang on one second. Let's see, oh, that's fine. Actual summary. Hold on, Jeremy, let me just find you real quick. Jeremy, you got a couple emails. You want the Gmail or the Pace?
Pace, please.
Okay. Okay, it's coming at you. Okay, so those who have a copy in front of them, so the first sheet on the expense summary, again, it goes through those. So I was able to do a little bit of cuts, and some are bigger than others. Working with departments and so forth. We have the select board, legal services, IT, Concom was an increase, historical district committee, and some of these, if they're a small committee, I might have just made a recommendation. Police department, regional dispatch, fire department, tree warden, highway department, COA, library, and employee benefits. So if you go to the expense breakdown sheet, which is the next one with all the details, it gives you, I think it's FY '23, FY '24 estimated, because I know Steve always asks me that question, how we're doing based on estimates. So if you're curious, there are numbers there. Again, they're not perfect. They're what we had at the time when we did it in the fall. And then FY '24 requests and TA requests. The TA is currently like my most up-to-date number with folks involved. Whenever I could, if it was a significant number, I would go back on the request and make sure it was the number that was submitted by the department and not originally submitted to me number. So if you look, the first one here, so under Select Board, so, yep, there we go, thanks, Jeremy. So first you have purchase services, right? So we were able to do a little bit of a decrease there, so not much, only a couple $100, so 6,839 to 6,639. And that had to do with $100 for, or $200 rather, that's the difference, for advertising. So we originally increased the advertising and we figured we could stick it back on the procurement projects that we were utilizing. That's what it was coming from. Supplies, we reduced by $100, and then annual audit, we had originally increased by a couple thousand, given the fact it's a new contract year, and we weren't sure if we were gonna go out to bid or not, so we did try to be a little more conservative and brought that down to 17,000. So overall, that was a $1,300 decrease there. Not huge, but still not bad. So you go down, legal services, very similar. We had increased because we wanted to have a little bit extra for union negotiations. We'll just be as tight and conservative as we can on legal services next year and decreased it by 2,000 to 15,500. So it's still 500 more than this year, but still conservative. Any questions on those two so far? Sorry. Okay. All right, municipal IT services. So there you'll see the compensation, we zeroed, oh, Jeremy, you're following me, okay? If you hide cells, N through F, it
Yep.
might make it a little less confusing for
You
people
want me
at
to hide
home.
these?
Yeah, I'd hide that all the way through F. Yep,
Boom.
sorry.
There we go,
And then
thank
if you
you.
hide everything from T over, you'll have less on your screen.
T this way?
Yep. Because that's interesting information, but not particularly helpful at the moment. There you go. Thank you. All right.
So what do we have an IT department if we have the two of you?
Because the two of us have worked.
Yes.
And phones have been a lot. So compensation gets rid of that, but you'll see IT consultant. Again, I don't know 100% if we're gonna be able to find it a consultant or if we're gonna go back to hiring someone. Our best guess is it's probably gonna be a consultant. We haven't gone out to bid yet. We're gonna have to go out to bid, at least requesting quotes because it's over $10,000, but under 50, so we're gonna have to do something for that size of a contract. We're still trying to figure out what our scope of services are. So we have forms we're using, we're tracking whatever we do to figure those pieces out, but in the meantime, we had to come up with a number, so I did. Purchase services, you'll see that number changed a little bit higher. That was just balance out the numbers correctly. Let's see, 30,000 IT consultant, and then equipment hardware, we did reduce that a little bit. It looks like I showed this as a savings. I was lying. This is actually an increased cost. I'm very sorry. I'll make that a different color now. Because it does actually go up a couple $1,000s. But again, we didn't know our IT director was gonna leave and that we were gonna have to do modification. You notice the equipment hardware, we had originally had it at 4,200. We actually reduced it to 3,300. So instead of 2 computers for town hall, it would just be 1. And we also thought it would be a good idea to add a $700 firewall for the Council on Aging because it's beyond its service life. And cybersecurity seems to be important, so we want to make sure we keep going with that. Elections is green, Jeremy, but you can keep going on that one. That's just, I forgot to get rid of green. Green was my methodology when everything stayed the same. Conservation Commission, so I did modify this number, so they recently hired someone. This year is 3131, next year will be the next step above that. It's only up to 16 hours a month. It's not a very high number, but I thought we should actually budget for the actual amount. So I did not consult them on that, I just did the math based on the offer letter that we had in front of us, and I calculated it out. Now, Whether or not that individual will get the clerk stipend, or whether it'll be someone from Concom, I don't know. I don't think they had that figured out last I had a conversation with them. So I wasn't 100% confident in just merging the two in, but I imagine at some point that might be a feasible option. Because I believe in the past, they've had the prior Conservation Commission be the clerk, and if that's the case, then, it should be blended. Historical District Commission, I think I had made this recommendation previously. They requested 200, I recommended 0. They haven't been spending it, and again, they have access to all of our resources, and the only buildings in the Historic District are the towns.
Heather, being a
Yeah,
multi-year, decade member of Finance Committee, I think it's appropriate for me to ask, what's the difference between 183 Historical District Commission and 691 Historical Commission?
they're different.
No, I know, what is the difference?
So the historical commission or committee, whatever it may be, is, it's town established, but it is to oversee, the historic preservation of the town. They have a specific bylaw, rules, regs, and so forth. Historic district, we created under a bylaw a couple years ago. We actually committed a kind of like an overlay district that was in the center area of town, and my understanding at the time is that there was some resistance to other property owners having their properties included in this, because the Historic District Commission actually gets to determine whether or not you can make improvements. So, for instance, when we go to do something at Town Hall, prior to making any adjustments to Town Hall, changing the siding, changing the door, even the sign out, electronic sign out front, we're required to submit an application for approval to the Historic District Commission.
Okay.
Or committee, it's a COM, I didn't spell it out, I apologize.
Okay.
That's as much sense as I could make of it for you. Okay. Police department, so I was able to work with the police chief. We reduced the part-time window help wages that he was looking for on Sundays down to 0. And we reduced the employee wages by approximately $3,000, so the overall cut between the two was about $10,000, give or take. Any questions on that? Okay.
So hold on one second.
Sure,
Could you repeat that again?
sure. So I worked with the chief,
Yeah?
and we eliminated the Sunday part-time window help down to nothing. So the fire department still takes care of the Saturday window help. So that will still be in place for the dispatch for out here. And then we reduced overtime by $10,000. Or, I'm sorry, by the balance of the $10,000. So the total cut between the two, the 7,784, and the overtime and employee wages is just over $10,000.
The way you've explained it is more comforting than the way it looks. The way it looks is that the window coverage was completely eliminated.
So his request for the window coverage for the Sunday edition is not, we don't have it now, so we're not
Right.
gonna, it wouldn't be started. We still have the Saturday that's done by the fire side, and that will continue. It was budgeted kind of out of the two departments, right? Since we don't really have a dispatch, we don't really have a joint, so it kind of looked half-seas.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right, regional dispatch. So the regional assessment, I guess, did actually go down a little bit, not significantly, but from 70,190 to 69,550. So we have that piece there. Let's see.
So we've exhausted anything to make that
So the last
go
piece.
away completely, frankly, because
So-
it's a $70,000 increase. I mean, you're
Yeah.
looking at a,
0 to 70,
yeah, you're looking at a nice $1,000 cut, but it went from 0 to 75,000 in order for you to cut it by 1,000, so.
So you have to remember, we knew this was coming. We've known this for a couple of years, right? When we got rid of our dispatch, state 911 covered the first 3 years, no cost. Then it becomes 25%, or I'm sorry, 50%, then 75%, and then full boat. So by year 6, we're at 100%. We're still trying to debate the calculation for calls for service and the measurements used for those pieces and the calculation of the assessment that's distributed amongst the 4 communities. But that put aside, unless we get much tracking on that, we're a little stuck at the moment. We haven't given up for good, but I don't know if we're gonna make much more progress before April 24th or before town meeting.
I want you to keep going, so what I'm trying to avoid is what I'm doing, but on the police department, I think it's important for us to know that in one of the papers that they have, one of the concerns we had was we weren't being competitive with respect to our police department officers' salaries. And since that time, if I'm not mistaken, we've lost 2 officers. Is that correct?
There's theoretically 3. There was one on the AMC side. But there's also a piece that isn't really public yet because we're working on the union and the select board had negotiated an element of the contract. And we did put a little bit of funding in for it in this agreement already, but it would potentially impact their wages. We're just waiting to have everything signed and sealed, and then we can talk about it. But we're working on those issues, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any more questions on regional dispatch? That's good. Okay, fire department. So I worked with the chief on this. He crunched his numbers. He was able to make some progress having the combined departments. So you'll see the revised numbers here for EMS employee wages, purchase services for EMS, purchase services fire, supplies, and equipment. So with that being said, you know, like everyone else, this makes it a very tight budget for him. So this will cover most things, but if something extraordinary happens that he's not predicting, like a major truck goes down, that's not gonna cover the cost of it. I don't mean goes down like a pop tire, I mean like a substantial,
But, I mean, if he had a major truck accident, he didn't have that plan in his original budget.
he didn't have all of it, no. But he probably would have been able to take a stab. So, but that's our most substantial cut there. You're looking at the difference between 279 and 221. Which luckily with Excel at this hour at night is 57,871. So that's a good chunk. So that almost covers, Mark, your ambulance receipts reserve number and your 10,000 from fire gifts and such. Right there. Nothing else really going down for a while. Tree warden, like I mentioned earlier, I reduced the compensation to 1,000. I increased the purchase services over FY '23's, but substantially decreased from what the request was. I know trees are important, but when we come back to the grand scheme of things, you know, employing our people to be able to do the work, I think it takes a little bit of priority.
Yeah, I'm not going to flash back to the screen that was up there earlier, but we were looking for a $10,000 cut, and there's a $10,000 cut sitting right there. And part of the motivation is that when the tree warden was here, he indicated he's got a 243 tree problem. That $10,000 is not going to help with that problem. It's going to help us more with our budget than it's going to help with the serious tree problem. That's why I suggested the $10,000 cut, and there it is. So, thank you.
All right, so DPW, so I worked with Travis this morning, or this afternoon rather. We were able to make a few modifications, so we were able to reduce employee wages and purchase services, totaling, I think it's $18,983, which is more than the $10,000 for the departments. That was your third line.
Yep. Can we change the name to DPW?
We can call it whatever you want.
Highway makes me think of 1960.
That's okay. So changed on my doc.
Public-
Everything else
Department of
that,
Public Works.
Everything else there, not much changes. Down to the library, I did work with Pam today. She has proposals to her library directors. She has not had them vote on it yet, so she wasn't comfortable releasing. But she will get her number down to the minimum, which is the 201,460. Remember, that's the minimum amount you can fund the library before they lose their funding, unless you do even cuts across the entire board, which are really hard to do when you have departments that the only thing in the department is one human. So that would be 201,460, which is a little bit more than 5,000. Other things, if you scroll down, let's see, employee benefits. So I think I have these again marked as less, but I lied. This is really more, to be blue, not yellow. So right here, we have health insurance premiums and retiree insurance. Looks like they went up from the initial numbers that I double-checked on Rich's spreadsheet that you guys had. I'm still working with Donna Kuchar on this. What keeps happening, right? So we had a couple officers leave. We've hired a couple new officers. So we kind of wait a week or so and figure out if they're taking health insurance and which one we know where to put them. So we know how much it is. We try not to over budget too much. We still have a little leeway in there just in case someone comes on. There's always the possibility more people jump into the opt-out and so forth. We're getting into the renewal season now, so things could change, but, you know, that's a number that's gonna keep evolving, right up until the time the warrant gets approved, right? But we'll try to keep those numbers as close as possible to whatever they are, and there's not really, there's a little wiggle room with one extra body. I know Donna Kuchar really wanted 2 extra bodies. My recommendation is just 1. We have quite a few accounted for at this time, and we seem to be having mostly a wash where someone will come on, someone will go off. Retiree assessment. So employee benefits, you'll notice I did break out retiree health insurance premiums. I think it's really important to keep that number separate. I think we want to know how much we're spending on retiree health insurance. And I think this, breaking it out in the same department will be good for us over the next couple of years, being able to track that number and see how it's trending. Retirement assessment, that's just the same. I just left it green because I didn't see the green. And central purchasing, Donna and I tried to play with central purchasing again today. At the end of the day, even with recalculating out the numbers, if I really were to recalculate them out, and to Mark's point earlier, I'd probably increase diesel by almost $20,000, which seems crazy, but, you know, the current figures are much higher.
That's about 25% more than this year?
Well, what happens, right, is, you know, like I said, the numbers keep fluctuating, and we try to weight the best we can to the lowest point. We usually go through CMRPC to a certain extent for some of our vendors. But what happened last year is they selected a vendor and they were like down the Cape. All right, we didn't think that was, you know, the wisest option for us. But if you look at numbers, right, so we have here oil. So oil, we based the numbers initial calculation on $4.50 per gallon, but last year's quantities, the current rate's only $3.58. So ultimately, if I went through all of those and calculated out precisely, I think I was saving like $2,000. The other figure was do I have, oh, it's right there in front of me, hello. Diesel, so last year we used, from July 21 to June of 22, we used 16,000 gallons in diesel. We originally calculated our rates based on $4.32. The current rate's $4.61. So again, we're hoping that the number's high and that it goes
A
down.
month ago it was 481, so I mean, diesel moves, fluctuation's crazy on this.
So, and again, I mean, we can correct for that, but that number's not gonna look like 44,000. The number's gonna look like 60-something thousand to account for the difference. And, you know, I'm happy to do it, but it's putting a stressor on the budget beyond what we know is an actual. So, that's all I have for my savings and pains.
I had two quick
Sure,
questions.
Tommy.
One, police, when we talk about, we just lost 2 police officers, do we know who we lost them to?
Yep, so we lost
Okay.
3 overall. One was, doing more work at AMC, and 2 were here, and 2 went to Leicester, and 1 went to Rutland.
Okay.
What we know is Leicester's contracts currently, I think it's like $2 more an hour, but they have a
Okay.
different benefit package. They also have the benefit where, you can earn, I think it's up to like 18 extra personal days if you have no sick time that you use. So, I think people are looking at money and,
Yeah, and that was my question, was when we say we're not competitive, are we comparing to towns that make sense to compare to?
so I think what's happening, right, like everyone else, is no one's really gung-ho about about going into the police department these days, right? So it's hard to get new recruits, and of the people who are there, they can pick and choose where they want to go, because if you're good, you can go anywhere you want. So
Yeah.
if one town's offering a couple dollars more, you can go there and vice versa.
Yeah. And are we at least competitive though with similar towns? I don't even know what a similar town would be, maybe.
I don't think we're not competitive. I think the
Okay.
part is that, if someone's looking for more money,
Right.
there's opportunities out
There's a
there
little
for
bit,
them
yeah.
to find the more money, and that
Right.
might be something that's better suited for them at this
Right.
time.
And that's what I was getting at. We can't try to be competitive with Worcester or Holden or Auburn, but at least it's a tough landscape, I think, in general. And then the other question was on the benefits. Are most of the employees or all the employees, is it in the state, like GIC pool?
Nope,
or-
so we go through Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency, so it's known as Maya,
Yep.
right? It's something that a majority of the 365 use, not all, but majority of the towns use, a good portion of school districts use as well.
Okay.
They're kind of a sub-branch now of the Mass Municipal Association, or the MMA, that all the towns are members of. And they generally do a good job because they pool all the claims together, right? So we've only been with them for a short while, of about a year, even though we have a higher claims history, because they have such a large pool, they're able to absorb some of the hit, so that it doesn't hit us higher than, I think it ended up becoming like 6.78% or something like that, instead of what we would have been slated for, which is over 10%.
So they actually process the claims and everything?
Yep, they do everything.
Okay.
They make it's pretty easy, central processing for that. We do that for our regular insurance, and we also have them for our health insurance.
Okay.
So what's the takeaway in the bottom right-hand number?
So all the way at the bottom there, so there's 2 things in town meeting article projects, and one number I was guessing because I couldn't remember. Can you scroll just a little bit for me? Thank you, Jeremy. So the first number is the Greenways article. I just throw that in there as the other article. They usually ask for 1,000. This year, they asked for 1,100. And then the other one in there is the fire department. So this is what I talked about last week. I have to double check that number. I thought it was 8, and then I had written down 10, so I need to double check. Remember, we talked again about the ladder truck. We had originally had pieces of equipment that we were gonna trade in to reduce the cost, but we found it was more cost-effective to sell the items separately. We got more money than we would have got for the trade-in, but then we need to take that money we're getting for the trade-in from the free cash to put it aside to be able to put it to offset the new vehicle. Because we don't have a trade-in anymore, right? So that's what that 10,000 is accounting for there, and then the road resurfacing is just offsetting the article that goes in on the revenue side. If you go to the expense summary, Jeremy, the first sheet, and scroll all the way down to the bottom. So you have the numbers there, so that's the total number. I have 15,733 and some change. And then you see town meeting article projects, 129,970, so that's the 118 for the roads, the 10,000 or so for the fire truck offset, and the 1,100 for greenways. Total expenses, 15,863. The revenues as last calculated as of March 28th, 15,628, I think it is, and then the difference at the bottom there.
That was the lower right-hand column number I was focusing on. So that's not having done the math in any of our heads, that's the new deficit.
That's what I have.
Right. So 2 weeks ago, we were at $444,000 deficit. Last week, we went down by 115. Today, we're at 234. So 2 weeks from today, we should have a balanced budget. So the $64,000 question is, and the elephant in the room is, how do we get the 234 to 0? Does town administration, the select board, anybody have any ideas? Because ideally, we'd go into the budgets and do some cuts. I don't imagine that there's anything further. We could spend 2 hours and come up with $10,000. And in many cases, devastate or cripple a department in coming up with even that little amount of money. So,
I only have 3 thoughts. All 3 are unpopular, whether they're as unpopular as some of yours, Mark, or more unpopular. I don't know. So
sale of a building's looking pretty good right about now.
here's what they are. I haven't reviewed them with anybody, so I don't know how people will feel about them, but I'm gonna throw them out there. So there's 3 things, right? The first, recreation. We have a mighty fine rec director who does an amazing job, and their programs are going very well. Theoretically speaking, you know, we could swap them and they could pay full-time for that position, and we could take on the free programs they do, right? Cover the cost for the Easter egg hunt, Memorial Day, and so forth. That would still only be a handful of $1,000, and they would take on, you know, her full salary, her full benefits, which would relieve the town of probably about another $40,000. But you swap it, you're still looking at 5 to 10, so it's about a 30, 35. I have not reviewed this with them. They're probably gonna kill me for even saying it. But again, Kathy does an absolutely amazing job with those programs. And I know, you know, they're looking at, you know, improving some of their projects, but, you know, maybe that's something to think about. The second idea that's even less popular, or maybe more popular than that one, but equally unpopular, you know, some towns will look at this point, when you get tight in budgets, you know, compensation for elected officials, right? You look at that, you're looking at 10 to 15K, even if you reduce some of those, maybe not down all the way, you're pulling up a little bit more there. And then the only other option I have in my pocket, it's not really my pocket, is operating stabilization to do the balance of the rest. We have enough to cover it, it's not a great idea. There's not other, I mean, we went through these budgets this year with a fine tooth comb already. That's why some of the departments, when I sat down, they're like, we already nickel and dimed this budget down to the penny. There's nowhere to go. But that also gives you the leeway in the event that the school comes back with E&D, that you reduce the number of operating by that amount, and you don't have to cut anything preliminarily or put it back. The fourth option, which I'm not even gonna recommend, but I just put it out there always, is always, you know, an override. But I don't think this is the year. I don't think there's support for it. And I think overrides are things that, you know, take 9 months to a year to build the case for, the information for, and make sure you've done everything you possibly can do before you ask. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Mark. Are my options more unpopular than yours?
Good list, and I'll run interference for you. None of us have any popular ideas to come up with $250,000. They're going to offend and hurt somebody or everybody or lots of people along the way. We're just trying to balance the budget without taking the easy way out, which is just passing it on to the taxpayers. So 2 more weeks, I'm sure, of difficult discussions, and thank you for leading with your difficult list. I've led with mine for a couple of weeks, so thanks for joining company here. What I would love for you to do, though, is to pursue the excess and deficiency, because I just have a very good feeling that that's going to come to fruition, and I don't know what the number is, and if it's a big number and it can soften the 234,000, then good for us. Not that we would immediately bank it, because they've got to jump through some hoops and over some hurdles, but I'd like to know quantifiably what is that particular number. So, stabilization is not popular, but it's supposed to stabilize things, and maybe this is the year to do it. The only difficulty is that, and a lot of us have been saying this year after year after year after year, but next year's not going to be a cakewalk either. So every year is difficult. So, but good information, thank you for giving it to us, and we'll digest it and come up with any additional ideas next week, and hopefully get this to zero, keeping in mind that the calendar pages are flipping. So we have until, at the absolute latest, April 24th. I'd love us to have our arms around this a week from tonight. So everyone's schedule, God willing, if you can keep that in your calendar, we'll be back at it this week. Would you mind, anybody mind if I recognize somebody in the public? No? Bill, go right ahead.
Okay, if you look at the building department, I don't know if that might be a typo over there, where it says the wiring inspector's salary is $3,800 and the assistant is $6,000. That's a simple typo.
What department number are you looking at, Bill?
241.
Yeah. We know the department, we just haven't memorized the department numbers, so.
Oh, anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. It's like the third page. if you
Yeah,
flip
we see
it.
it. So your question now that we're there is,
Yeah, one is supposed to be the wiring inspector and one should be gas and plumbing.
What the, says
Yep.
assistant.
Yep, but it should be gas and, one should be wiring, one should be gas and plumbing.
Okay.
So correct. Good pick.
Okay. Now, the other comment I'd like to make is hopefully they come up with a great contract, or a reasonable contract for the police department. I had a discussion with the chief today on some issues, and there might be a crisis developing here to the point where they might be losing other officers and have to cut shifts. Won't be covered. Secondly, when you talk about the recreation department, we have to look at Paxton. Why do people come here? Number one, quality of life. But where do you get your quality of life? Your safety is your police department. You take that recreation. In a town like this, there's not much recreation going on unless you join a sports team. And then again, they fill that void. And it's essential that we keep the quality of life up with the safety, recreation, and of course the schools. Our schools have always been rated very highly. So to bring people here, if we're talking about development, we want people to come here, build here, live here. We gotta have something to give them. Security, recreation are two main things for, especially the families coming here. And something to really think about, and maybe have a team back with the chief and see what's going on, all right? So, I appreciate that.
good point, Bill. I would add to that every single one of our departments are critical. The library, the
Well, they all
DPW,
are,
the COA, they all add to the fabric of this community, which attracts all of us to be here. So you're right.
Right.
And that makes doing what we're having to have to do even more difficult and
One
more
other comment.
challenging.
Nobody wants to go to bed at night knowing there is no police officer on duty. As you remember, you might not recall, a gang from Hartford, Connecticut came in here, and they were going through all the cars, including my wife's. The one night she didn't lock the door, they broke into the car. Our police department, with the help of other departments, broke that gang up. There's still a potential for them to come here. One thing I'll tell you with my 40 years police experience, when you lose senior officers and replace them with recruits, all that skill is like having a college graduate being replaced by a high school person. Why? You might go to a police academy, you learn the basics. You learn in your community by being out there. And if you have 5 years of service, you're a veteran officer. You lose those people, you have a rookie police department, and you're really taking a big chance on that. So you got to think about these things in the long run, and I know the citizens want the best, and security is, we never locked our doors here until after that carving came here. Now they're locked every day. So something to think about.
Yep.
And hopefully you can find that other 250 someplace. You know, salaries are the biggest part of the budget. That's a tough situation, but that's where the dilemma looks.
Well, we're accepting legacy gifts, if that is something you'd like to consider, Bill, so.
I'll tell you what, being retired on a fixed income, I'm looking for that myself.
Yeah. So are there any other comments or new business or old business?
The only one to add to that real quick is just we gotta remember, I think we have to really keep in mind, especially now, that like, I spent 7 years in EMS, you know, and I agree 100%. But we have to remember too that I feel like sometimes we get caught up in trying to almost just only talking about what we're doing for the town employee, but the people who live here are going through ridiculously hard times that are unprecedented, like 1% wage increases for 5, 6, 7 years, bonuses. This is a pretty affluent town, but there's people that moved here when they were getting a $30,000-$40,000 bonus every year that aren't getting it now. You know, so it is, I don't think it's hard to vote again. For me personally, to ever deny EMS or police anything is really difficult, you know, or the school or any of that. So I think there's really tough decisions, but we got to keep in mind that the people that we're asking to get stuff from are facing, they might have to leave town, they might have to move somewhere. I've talked to plenty of people that are considering selling, and so it is difficult, just we got to keep that in mind too.
Very good point.
You know, I went through the roster today from the town, I got the booklet, and just looking at the people, we have an amazing amount of retirees here. Retiree equates fixed income,
Yeah.
so it's a tough situation.
Good comments all. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second,
Second.
discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. We're adjourned. Adjourned?
Thank you, everyone.
Yep, thank you as well.